The Neon Demon is a film that came out during the summer of 2016 that immediately flew under the radar. It's a film directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, and it seems that those who are only big fans of Refn took the time to go out and see the film. Refn is known to be a very artistic risk-taker who isn't afraid to go through with his artistic vision, regardless of what both critics and audiences will think. Drive, to me, is one of his only accessible films that both critics and audiences can enjoy while still maintaining his artistic stylistic vision. His more darkly obscure films that seem to split audiences and critics up are films like Valhalla Rising and Only God Forgives, and The Neon Demon definitely falls under that category. The Neon Demon is a brilliantly shot, smoothly edited, and beautifully lit film that has perfect and purposeful placement of its characters and objects throughout the film, which of course is accompanied by a wonderfully hypnotic score by Cliff Martinez. It's certainly an acquired taste, and it's not a film for everyone, but it's definitely a film worth discussing and analyzing with other film lovers. Now that we got all that nuanced shit out of the way, let's dive into the world of the Neon Demon. The film begins with an astonishing yet simplistic opening credits sequence that contains a colorful backdrop scheme that slowly changes color as the credits roll, which is immediately accompanied by its retro-style score. I saw this film in a theater, and it truly was an experience. I remember seeing the opening credits roll, and I immediately knew I was going to be in for a real treat. As the title begins to appear, you see this beautiful flashy glitter slowly pour down on the screen, and the perfectly timed score kicks in hard. I bring this up just to express to you how smoothly edited and precise this film is and how careful Refn was with his vision. The first shot of the film shows our main character Jessie depicted with her throat cut, laying dead on a couch as the camera slowly tracks backwards, revealing more off-screen space. It kind of reminded me of the beginning shot of A Clockwork Orange where the camera slowly tracks backwards. It's not as gorgeously done, but it's still a great shot. It's a great shot because you don't know for certain what is really happening. It's as if Refn wanted to trick the audience into thinking she was murdered and there are people around her taking pictures of a brutal crime scene, and the look on the photographer's face can easily give off that impression. This is also a pretty cool foreshadowing shot of a crucial point later on down the road. The next scene rolls along and we see Jessie washing off the fake blood and makeup. This is where we are first introduced to Ruby's character, a makeup artist played by Jenna Malone. And you can immediately tell that Ruby has some kind of thing for Jessie by the way she talks to her and by the way she expresses herself while conversing with her. Ruby invites Jessie to a party where she gets introduced to the other models for the first time, Sarah and Gigi. There's actually a lot of important things revealed by this scene alone. Ruby mentions that lipstick companies are more likely to name their lipsticks after food or sex. She then proceeds to ask Jessie if she is food or is she sex. Gigi then implies that she's dessert because she's so sweet. This is a very incredible, subtle piece of foreshadowing dialogue that I'll come back around to later. At a certain point, Gigi begins to brag about all of the plastic surgery she's gotten and how her designer calls her the Bionic Woman. Jessie asks her if her designer means that as a compliment or not. Gigi then gets offended and begins to tease and intimidate Jessie by mentioning the death of her parents and putting her sexual activity into question. This is when Sarah says something important that I believe is a reoccurring theme throughout the film.
All she really wants to know is, who are you fucking?
Sorry?
What? Isn't that what everyone wants to know? Pretty new girl walks into a room, everyone's head turns, looks her up and down, wondering, who's she fucking? Who could she fuck? And how high can she climb, and is it higher than me?
This is something salient that gets brought up a few more times after this point, and I believe this theme has a relation to the triangular symbolism that is shown throughout the course of the film. But I'll dive more into that when we start getting to more of the meat of the film. Ruby then drags Jessie back to the party so they can see a show. And this scene is such a treat to watch, especially in a dark and loud theater. It's accompanied by Julian Winding's Demon Dance, and it's such a stylistic piece that reassures us that we are definitely watching a Refn film. The cinematography and the placement of characters in this scene is superb. I had to interpret the scene, I would say that it represents the superficiality of the modeling industry, with everything being enjoyably flashy and beautiful on the exterior, but within the interior lies an ugly, miserable entity desiring and aspiring to be beautiful. The next day, Jessie goes to a big important interview with a modeling agency led by Roberta Hoffman, played by Christina Hendricks. She explains to Jessie that she thinks she's beautiful and is going to make it big in the industry. She warns her that people are going to insult her and call her nasty things in order to make her feel insecure. She also tells Jessie to lie about her age and to tell people that she's 19 when she's actually 16. She sets her up with an appointment with a photographer that she knows and gives her a parental consent form and sends her on her way. We then get a long take of her forging her parents' signature, and we don't realize that this is a mirror image shot until the very end of the scene. This film is loaded with mirror image shots. It could just be Refn just playing on the fact that models have to look at themselves in the mirror more than anybody should or has to, but there could be a larger existential reason behind the mirror that represents how models struggle with their identity. Either way, it's pretty awesome to look at. The next scene, she goes out with her previous photographer to celebrate her signing with the modeling agency. We get an insightful scene where she explains a childhood memory, where she used to get on top of the rooftop and stare at the moon because she always thought that the moon looked like a big round eye. We also get a very interesting exchange between Jessie and the photographer, in which they discuss Jessie's future. Jessie explains that she never had any real talent, but she knows that she's pretty and that she can make a lot of money off of pretty. Her photographer tries to tell her that she's probably good at a lot of things, but she just doesn't know it yet. This exchange represents the classic conversations that models have with other people. The classic conversation where one tries to explain to the model that they are worth way more than just their beauty. The photographer proceeds to give her a ride back home, and he attempts to kiss her, but she kindly refuses, so he also kindly gives her a handshake instead. Jessie unlocks the door to her room and finds an unwanted guest in there, so she runs to the hotel manager to explain the problem. This is where we get introduced to Keanu Reeves' character. He plays an incredibly sleazy, rundown hotel manager who advertises his hotel as a safe haven for runaway teens. Him and his partner go to investigate Jessie's room, and it's accompanied by an electrifyingly unsettling score. They kick the door down because Keanu gets impatient with the door lock, and at first they find nothing except for a torn apart room. He threatens Jessie by telling her that she has to pay for the damages, and if she doesn't, then he's gonna find her. But then his friend shines the light into her room and actually finds a live cougar in her bed. I'll have more to add to that later. The next scene shows Jessie arriving at the photo shoot that her modeling agent set her up for. We get a really smooth, slow pan of the camera until we see that Ruby catches Jessie walking into the set. You can see Ruby is extremely happy to see Jessie again, and it's accompanied by a really dreamy score. I think the purpose of this was to emphasize on Ruby's infatuation with Jessie. Ruby puts on makeup for Jessie and introduces her to the photographer. The photographer is extremely intimidating and gives Jessie an incredibly dull, hard stare. The photographer directs Jessie from outside of the white backdrop to directly inside of it, which creates a very interesting shot that creates an illusion for the audience as we lose the scene's sense of space and location. It's like we leave the real world and enter the illusory modeling world in real time. He then tells everybody at the set to get out because he wants to do a close set with Jessie. Ruby interjects and says that she doesn't mind staying, which to me furthers Ruby's obsession with Jessie. The photographer of course objects to this. We then get a darkly suspenseful scene when we are alone with Jessie and the photographer, because it puts us into the perspective of what Jessie is feeling here. She has no idea what the photographer has in store for her, and it gets quite terrifying when the photographer demands that she takes off all of her clothes. He shuts off all the lights, and the tension here just keeps winding. He comes back with a big can of gold paint, and we get such an emotionally confusing and hypnotic scene that's shot in slow motion and accompanied by a euphoric score. He takes the gold paint and very sensually rubs it all over her body and neck. But the way it's shot really grabs you and captures the emotion that someone like Jessie would feel in the situation. Terrified, shocked, happy, nervous, calm, accomplished. It's just a scene that contains a mixed bag of emotions and expresses these emotions with its directing, subtle acting, cinematography, and sound. We can somewhat grasp what Jessie is feeling here without a single word being spoken by anybody. This is what Refn is great at. He's excellent at conveying exactly what he wants out of a scene without having to verbally spell it out through expository spoon-fed written dialogue. The next scene, Jessie finds Ruby waiting outside for her. Jessie explains that she thought it went extremely well and that he might consider her for editorial, but Ruby states that she shouldn't be alone with him and that he makes a lot of promises to young girls that he can't commit. Ruby gives Jessie her number and tells her to call her if she ever needs anything. Ruby, Gigi, and Sarah all meet up at a diner, and when Ruby brings up Jessie's name, Gigi pretends as if she doesn't remember who she is. The way the scene is directed and written, you can tell that both Gigi and Sarah are becoming very insecure and envious of Jessie by throwing out insults at Jessie and towards each other. Sarah has another piece of interesting foreshadowing dialogue here.
Who wants sour milk when you can get fresh meat?
Ruby, on the other hand, is more fascinated and impressed by her. She shows a more appreciative and hopeful reaction than the other two models do for sure. The next scene, Jessie is at a casting call for a fashion designer, and apparently Sarah is also there too. Can we just take a second to appreciate this shot right here? I mean, just look at it. It's such a beautifully framed shot with delicate placement of characters that really creates a certain appeal and atmosphere. I mean, it conveys insecurity, confidence, and competition in just one shot alone. Real Alita shit.
Real Alita shit.
What makes this next scene so great is the way it's crafted and directed. Each model gets called up to walk in front of the fashion designer. The fashion designer pays no mind to any of the models, not even enough to look up at them and acknowledge them as they're giving them their walk performance. When Sarah gets up to walk in front of him, he also pays her no mind. Sarah asks him if he wants her to walk again, and he simply looks up at her and calmly shakes his head no. Jessie gets called up, and he is immediately astonished by her beauty as expressed by the look of amazement on his face. He asks how old she is, and she lies to him and says that she's 19. With his eyes glued to her, he watches her in awe as she shows him her walk. His amazement in her beauty is expressed through gulping and subtle gasping as she is walking. And the look on Sarah's face throughout all of this is priceless. Sarah knew that from the second that she saw Jessie there that they were going to see something special in her. The fashion designer gives his lady assistant a nod yes to send her to measurements. Jessie's face is expressed with accomplishment and excitement, and Sarah's face is filled with hopelessness and devastation. This was the official turning point for Sarah, where she is no longer going to put up with Jessie anymore. Every one of the three ladies that befriended Jessie will have their turning points due to some sort of event involving Jessie. So Sarah goes to the bathroom and stares at herself in the mirror with disappointment, and she picks up a large object and throws it at the mirror, causing it to shatter. Jessie hears the mirror shatter from down the hall and slowly approaches her to try and make things better. Jessie tells her that she honestly thought that she did great. Sarah rejects her compliment and tells her to stop pretending. Sarah asks her what it feels like. Jessie pretends to not know what she's talking about here, so Sarah elaborates with this interesting comparison.
What's it feel like? What do you mean?
To walk into a room, and it's like in the middle of winter, you're the sun.
It's everything.
Jessie admits that her beauty means everything to her. Sarah kind of lunges at her, which causes Jessie to cut her hand by sliding it on the floor where the broken glass laid. Sarah grabs Jessie's bloody hand and attempts to drink it and consume it. Jessie obviously freaks the fuck out and gets the hell out of there. Then we see Sarah laying on the floor, cold, pathetic, dismantled, and horrified. She goes back to her hotel and sneaks into her room because she still unrightfully owes money to the hotel manager for the damages to her room. She goes to her bathroom and attempts to disinfect the wound on her hand with alcohol and painfully succeeds. Someone knocks on her door and she thinks it's going to be Keanu Reeves, the hotel manager, but to her pleasant surprise, it's her old photographer bringing her some flowers. I'm guessing due to the pain that she just endured, she attempts to grab the flowers as she passes out on the floor. She then goes into a dreamy trance involving that blue glowy triangle that we've all seen before. Then we see two hands trying to penetrate through a barrier of wallpaper or a sheet of some kind. Since this is the second time the triangle has showed up, I'll just go ahead and start talking about what I think the concept of the triangle represents. And by the way, anybody who says that the triangle represents the secret shadow society of the Illuminati is completely out of their mind and gave no interest in actually thinking deeply about these concepts. It's like whenever they see a form of a triangle in anything, they immediately jump to, holy shit, Illuminati exposed! To me, the triangle is supposed to represent the capitalistic journey to stardom through beauty, but it demands one to be ruthless, arrogant, and egocentric. It's a battle to the top, and the one that makes it is the one that has no regard or care for others around them. To bring up a film that used this similar concept is The Revenant. Leonardo DiCaprio's character has a few visions of a giant pyramid made of skulls. The director himself stated that the central theme of the film is about the dangers of capitalism and how there can sometimes be a lack of humanity in it. It's about the vicious race to success, even if it means that others have to be kicked to the curb and even die for it. And in terms of the modeling industry, you might have to suck it up and screw a few friends out of a job and have sex with a few important people if you want to make it, because the competition is so high. So the hands that are trying to penetrate through the wallpaper is Jessie trying to achieve that stardom through her beauty, but she has her modesty and integrity holding her back. The savagery of the modeling industry has no place for her modesty, unfortunately. She wakes up out of her trance, and Dean goes down to see the hotel manager and attempts to pay him so Jessie doesn't have to sneak into her room anymore. Keanu is being a real dick to Dean, but ends up taking the money. He tells Dean that Jessie isn't worth his time if she's not having sex with him. And like the sleazebag like he is, he even offers Dean a 13-year-old runaway teen living next door to Jessie. And then he gives one of the most memorable lines from the entire film.
Feel the leadership. Feel the leadership. Room 214. Gotta be seen.
We now see Jessie at the fashion show that she was chosen for by the fashion designer that she competed for against Sarah. Gigi is also there and walks past her and looks back at her in sheer disbelief that she's even there. This is another great scene where the mirrors are placed and utilized eloquently. She makes Jessie get out of her seat and begins to accuse Jessie of fucking the fashion designer. Gigi insults her again by calling her masculine and begins to brag about all of the plastic work and surgery that she's got done to her. She also says that it began with just one tweak, but her doctor pointed out a lot of other flaws with her body. I find this piece of dialogue compelling because it conveys a dark truth about certain doctors who take advantage of insecure models who are trying to look as beautiful as they can be. Jessie asks Gigi if any of the work that she's got done to her was painful or not. And Gigi says that anything that is worth having hurts little, and in the end, nobody really likes the way that they look. Jessie actually objects to this and says that she does like the way that she looks. And Gigi gives her this face of smug pettiness before they are interrupted, and Jessie is told that the fashion designer wants to see her. And the track of the score here is so perfectly in tune with the film. I mean, it pretty much is throughout the entire film, but this is just a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Pauses and cues are placed so purposefully and delicately that it's hard not to point it out and appreciate it. That's some real Lolita shit.
Feel the leadership.
We then get a slow pan shot as we see all the models lined up in order for the fashion show. We see that all the models have ugly messed up makeup except for Jessie, who is finishing the show. Before the camera pans to Jessie, we see Gigi turn back and stare at Jessie, which is a very neat character detail. This is when we get one of my favorite scenes in the entire film. It's an incredibly hypnotic runway sequence that seems to be another dreamy trance of Jessie's. This entire segment is conveyed through the euphoric score, facial expressions, and visuals. Jessie sees the triangular plane starting to form from the distance. Both Jessie and the triangle are blue, and the camera gives us two different first-person perspectives. One is from Jessie's perspective, and one is from the perspective of the triangular platform. They go back and forth, staring at each other for a bit. Then from the perspective of the triangle, you start to see Jessie walk up to it. And once she arrives and stops at the triangle, she can see her reflection in a three-sided mirror slowly moving towards her. Jessie has a hesitant, nervous, and anxious look on her face. And then this happens. The lights turn from blue to red, and the score turns incredibly intense into this dark electronic sound. The blue represented innocence and calmness, and the red represented vanity, sexuality, and evil in a metaphorical sense. Her facial expressions turns from hesitantly nervous to fiercely confident. She sees her reflection seductively and sensually kissing both sides of the mirror with her new diabolical facial expression. She then walks away from the triangle back towards the entrance of the runway. To me, the scene was about her successfully penetrating through that barrier of modesty and innocence and succumbing to what the modeling industry demands of her, which is to be a self-indulged, arrogant, and stuck-up person that doesn't care about the well-being, success, or failures of other people. She truly became obsessed with her own beauty to the point where her goal turned from just making money to flaunting her own success at others. This is demonstrated in her actions in the following scenes that come later on in the film. The next scene, she enters the shot through beaded curtains and she looks as if she's been reborn into a brand new person. We see the fashion designer trying to impress Gigi and some other unnamed model with a theatrical monologue delivery. He begins to brag about how his artistry and creation is in his blood. Then we get a great conversational exchange between the fashion designer, the models, and Dean about beauty and its relevance to humanity.
I went out for a film last week.
Oh yeah? How'd it go?
They said my face didn't match my voice.
Oh, you can fix your face.
No, don't do that.
Why not?
Because you can always tell when beauty is manufactured. And if you aren't born beautiful, you never will be.
That's terrible.
No, it's true.
I don't think you can always tell.
Dean, we're having a little debate over here and we need your expertise.
Okay.
You know Gigi, right?
Well, I mean, we just met.
Wait, will you stand up so that he can take a look at you? Go on, stand up. Well?
Well, what?
What do you think? Do you think she's beautiful?
I don't know, I mean... Yeah, I guess she's fine.
Yes, that's exactly the word that I was looking for. She's fine, right? You can sit down now, thanks. Thank you, Dean. Now, look at Jessie. Nothing fake, nothing false. A diamond in a sea of glass. True beauty is the highest currency we have. Now, without it, she would be nothing.
I think you're wrong.
Excuse me?
I said I think you're wrong.
So are you going to tell me that it's what's inside that counts?
Yeah, that's exactly what I think.
Well, I think that if she wasn't beautiful, you wouldn't have even stopped to look.
This is one of my favorite scenes in the film because it casually discusses and conveys the main theme of the film, which is about beauty and the obsession that humanity has with it. He uses Gigi as an object and compares her to Jessie by pointing out that true beauty comes naturally, not manufactured like Gigi's. When Dean attempts to argue that it's what's on the inside that counts, the fashion designer makes such a sad but true rebuttal when he states that if Jessie wasn't beautiful, he would not have even bothered to look. There's a lot of truth in that statement. No matter how much we encourage ourselves that a person's morals and personality is far more important than their looks, their exterior seems to play a salient role in determining whether or not we want to currently engage with them or continue to engage with them in the future as a partner. The fashion designer ends the scene by saying that beauty isn't everything, it's the only thing, which further conveys how severely obsessed people can be with beauty and how high people hold beauty as a standard in their life. I'd like to go ahead and point out that this is officially Gigi's turning point. Jessie easily moved past both Gigi and Sarah to the top, and after that degrading display that the fashion designer put Gigi through, they were both done with her. The only one left protecting her is Ruby, and her turning point is coming very soon. Dean urges Jessie that they should both leave because he feels uncomfortable, and Jessie tells him that he can go if he wants to. This is a new arrogant attitude that I mentioned earlier that we are not used to seeing from our main character. She heads back to her hotel and finds Dean waiting there and quite disappointed in her and asks her why she wants to be like them. She responds that it's not her that wants to be like them, it's them that wants to be like her. Again, she's displaying the opposite of what it means to be modest here. She makes her way back to the hotel and she lays down in her bed and she slowly and sensually twirls her legs. She falls asleep and has a nightmare involving the hotel manager, slowly coming into her room and forcibly and sexually putting a knife into her mouth and slowly goes deeper as he tells her to open her mouth wider and wider. It's a pretty terrifying scene, but not as terrifying as what comes afterwards. She wakes up from her nightmare. The hotel manager is trying to break into her room, but is unsuccessful. He then goes to the room next door, room 214, the room that he mentioned earlier to Dean that has a runaway 13-year-old living in it. We hear him break in and violently hear the young girl suffer and fight back as she's being raped. This is for sure the most disturbing and terrifying scene in the entire film. It's portrayed so realistically and is conveyed to us in a way where we don't even have to see exactly what's happening, but we know what's happening through the sound design. Jesse gives Ruby a call to inform her on what's happening. Ruby offers her place to Jesse, and at the same time as we're hearing the phone call, we get a beautiful long zoom out take of Jesse putting her ear to the wall. Jesse arrives at what is supposed to be Ruby's house. Jesse takes a shower and thanks Ruby for letting her stay at her place. Ruby responds that it's not her house and that she's just house sitting, but she explains it in this manner.
I don't live here.
But I thought you said this was your house.
No, I said I'm house sitting. Watering the plants. Checking the mail.
I believe the purpose of her elaboration on house sitting is to reflect her occupation as a makeup artist. Her job is to pamper and maintain the models so they can look flashy and presentable. She also works in a morgue where she puts makeup on deceased bodies to make sure that they look presentable for burials and open caskets. So her whole career is based on enhancing the beauties of others for the public eye to see. The beauty that she enhances belongs to others rather than herself, just like how the house does not belong to her, but her job is to make it pretty and presentable as she does the models. Or at least that's what I got from it. Next, Ruby comes on to Jesse pretty hard and tries to have sex with her, and Jesse kindly rejects her by saying that she's never actually been with anyone in that way. Ruby seems to get more turned on by this and begins to force herself onto Jesse. Jesse gets frustrated and shoves her off the bed while yelling at her to stop. Ruby gets extremely offended by this and gives her the most intimidating stare as she walks out of the room and slams the door. The next scene is Ruby drawing a face on the mirror with lipstick with 2 X's for eyes, symbolizing the soon-to-be death of Jesse. This is quite obviously Ruby's turning point here. Ruby was the only one left that liked Jesse, so now Jesse doesn't have anybody on her side protecting her. The next day, while Ruby is at her job, Jesse scopes around the house and she subtly walks past a stuffed cougar on top of a shelf. Now some might consider this too far of a jump, but I think that maybe one or all the models are responsible for putting a live cougar in Jesse's room at the beginning of the film, for the purpose of either killing her or turning her hopeless and out on the street. It's the only logical conclusion I can make in regards to how a cougar got into her room. It just seems oddly coincidental that the models happen to have a stuffed cougar that looks almost exactly like the one that was in Jesse's room. The next scene shows Ruby at her job at the morgue. She becomes sexually frustrated and begins to get intimate with a dead body. As she's pleasuring herself on top of a dead body, it cuts back and forth between Ruby and her imagination, which is her picturing Jesse on a couch, very slowly and sensually touching her face and body. A lot of people found this particular scene to be unnecessarily gratuitous and excessive because it seemed to not have any relevance to the plot of the film. People assumed that it was just Refn trying to showcase one of his fetishes, but I actually find this scene to be very fitting in accordance to the theme of everything and its characters. The central theme of the film was about the unhealthy obsessions that human beings and society has towards beauty. Most characters in the film have displayed unhealthy obsessions with beauty. For instance, Gigi is obsessed with beauty in the sense that she is constantly paying for plastic surgery because she wants to become flawless in the eyes of others. The fashion designer is obsessed with the concept of beauty itself to the extent that he believes that beauty is all humanity really has and without it would be nothing. He will also go as far as dehumanizing others just to make a point about it. And Ruby is simply obsessed with those who are beautiful, specifically Jesse. She was infatuated by Jesse the entire film, so much so that she will go to the extent of masturbating on top of a dead body as she imagines Jesse's beauty. Sarah isn't necessarily obsessed with beauty itself, but is more obsessed with the success that her beauty will bring her. So I think that the scene with Ruby at the morgue is not out of left field like most people would think, and it most definitely fits in with the film's narrative and themes. Ruby comes back to the mansion to find Jesse standing at the end of the diving board of the swimming pool with the elegant gown on. And the way this scene is shot and angled from Ruby's point of view, it looks like Jesse is some sort of goddess hovering over her. Jesse begins to give Ruby an arrogant spiel about how people mutilate their bodies just to have hopes in possessing a second-rate version of her beauty. This goes to show that Jesse's modesty has most definitely completely been thrown out the window at this point. Jessie starts walking back towards the mansion and she sees Gigi waiting there for her, and she gives her this snarky-ass remark.
Are we having a party or something?
She begins to walk away, and then Sarah comes out of the darkness and punches Jessie square in the face. Jessie attempts to run away from them, incredibly frightened, but they end up cornering her outside. Ruby slowly walks up to her and aggressively shoves her into the empty pool below, which ends up being the death of her. And the shot of her slowly dying there at the bottom of the pool looks awfully familiar to the beginning shot of the movie. This is why I believe that the first shot of the film is a great piece of subtle foreshadowing imagery of what would happen to our main character later on through the film. This is when the third act of the film really kicks into overdrive. The next scene we see Gigi and Sarah taking a shower while consuming some of Jesse's blood while Ruby is literally laying in a bathtub bathing in Jesse's blood. So they've essentially eaten her and used her blood and flesh for ritualistic purposes. Earlier in the beginning of the film, when Jessie first meets the models in the bathroom at the party that Ruby invites her to, Ruby directly asks Jessie if she is food or sex. The reason I believe that this is such a great piece of foreshadowing dialogue is because once Jessie refuses to engage sexually with Ruby, she became food. This is actually something that I noticed on the third viewing of the film and hadn't noticed any time before that. The next day, Ruby is outside topless, watering the plants and cleaning up leftover blood from the pool. Then she is seen laying in Jessie's grave while reading some sort of book. At night, we see her lay out on the floor naked in the mansion in the moonlight. And then we see what seems like a bucket of blood coming out of Ruby's vagina. It's way too much blood to be menstrual blood, so I'm assuming that it's Jessie's blood that she deuced inside of her for ritualistic purposes. Many viewers who have attempted to interpret this like to say that the three models are literal witches or vampires performing witchcraft. I personally wouldn't go that far. For me, there really isn't enough evidence to come to that conclusion. Some evidence that actually would conclude this is if there was some sort of display of otherworldly actions or powers that witches or vampires hold. All we really have is them performing rituals that witches or vampires would do. So to me, it just seems like these are all three mentally unstable women who have an unhealthy obsession with beauty who perform witch-like rituals as a way to kill and get rid of intimidating competition. So in the next scene, we see Gigi and Sarah arrive at Jack's photo shoot. Gigi is the one who is actually going to be in the photo shoot. Sarah just tagged along with her. As Gigi is getting her makeup done, there is another model sitting next to her talking about the industry. She asks Sarah if she ever had someone cheat her out of a job. She responds with yes, and then when she asks about what she did about it, she honestly replies and says that she ate her. I love how we can see this horrified and guilty expressed face from Gigi as if she's experiencing some kind of remorse for what she did to Jessie. Gigi is outside and getting in position with the other models. The photographer has second thoughts about one of the models he currently has for the photo shoot, and he asks Sarah if she wants to take her place. Sarah happily agrees and joins Gigi in the shoot. But Gigi begins to feel devastatingly sick, and we get an interesting shot of inside the pool that they're standing over, staring up at Gigi as she's about to vomit. Gigi can't take it anymore and walks off the set to go and attempt to puke. We see her in a dressing room constantly gagging and attempts to vomit, but she just can't. I thought this was a great acting on her part, to be honest. Sarah, in her curiosity, walks off the set to go and see what's going on with Gigi. She walks into the dressing room where Gigi is literally dying inside. The only thing she manages to puke up is ironically one of Jessie's eyeballs. And she cries to Sarah, saying,
I need to get her out of me. I need to get her out of me.
Gigi cuts her stomach open and dies right there in front of Sarah. Sarah, a little distraught at first, kneels down, picks up the eyeball, and eats it. She walks out of the room, and I'm assuming returns to the set. Then the film ends to a song that Sia wrote specifically for this film. So what was going on with Gigi? What was the purpose of this ending? Well, for me, it's a grand display of themes among the film's characters and concepts. Gigi was known to be someone who was extremely weak, insecure, and unnaturally beautiful. So when someone like Gigi tries to consume someone who is strong, confident, and naturally beautiful, it's like oil and water. They're just not gonna mix at all, no matter how hard you try and force it. As for the eyeball that Gigi puked up, the eyeball represented an innocent memory of Jesse's past that was expressed at the beginning of the film, when she mentioned that she used to go on top of rooftops and stare at the moon because she always thought that it looked like a big round eye. So maybe it was Jesse's innocence attempting to make its way out of Gigi's body. As for Sarah, her eating the eyeball is an accurate reflection of her character throughout the film. She's been the one that was more confident and never really cared for the success of others besides her own. So her eating the eyeball is another way of pointing the middle finger to Gigi and Jesse by flaunting the fact that she doesn't care for either of them, as long as it means that she's the one that's going to be rising to the top. I feel that Keanu Reeves' character is supposed to represent the dangers of the world outside of the modeling bubble, and the models are supposed to represent the dangers that exist within the bubble. So that's my way of interpreting this insane yet incredibly memorable artistic film, and I think all of the actors involved in this film did a phenomenal job. It's truly not an easy task acting in a Refn film. As far as Refn films goes, The Neon Demon is probably my personal favorite of his. I think Drive as a film product is crafted a little better in terms of filmmaking standpoint, but The Neon Demon has just stapled itself into my mind and it hasn't escaped it since I saw it in theaters. Like I've stated many times earlier, the score is hypnotic, the cinematography and lighting is gorgeous, it's artistically consistent with its themes and characters, and it contains plenty of scenes that are euphoric. So right now it's my personal favorite of his, and if I were to give it a grade, I'd give it an A. Thanks for taking the time to watch this long ass video, and if you want to be updated on new content like this and other film related videos, please like, subscribe, and share this with others who appreciate the art of filmmaking.